In this video, we will explore the different types of armor and weapons that were used during the medieval period, their construction, and their effectiveness in battle. Armor was an essential part of medieval warfare. It was designed to protect the wearer from various types of weapons and attacks, including swords, axes, spears, and arrows. The armor was made from a variety of materials, including leather, metal, and cloth, and it was designed to be as strong and durable as possible. One of the most common types of armor was chain mail. Chain mail was made from thousands of small metal rings that were woven together to form a protective layer. It was lightweight and flexible, which made it a popular choice among soldiers. However, it was not completely effective in stopping certain types of weapons, such as arrows or crossbow bolts. Plate armor was another type of armor that became popular during the medieval period. Plate armor consisted of multiple metal plates that were fastened together to form a solid protective layer. Plate armor was much heavier and less flexible than chain mail, but it provided better protection against swords and other weapons. One of the most iconic pieces of plate armor is the medieval knight's suit of armor. These suits of armor were typically made from steel and consisted of multiple pieces, including a helmet, breastplate, pauldrons, shoulder armor, gauntlets, glove-like armor for the hands, and greaves, leg armor. The suits of armor were designed to protect the knight from head to toe and were often adorned with elaborate designs and emblems. While plate armor was highly effective in protecting the wearer, it was also incredibly expensive to produce. This meant that only the wealthiest members of society could afford to wear it, and it was often reserved for knights and other high-ranking officials. Another type of armor that was used during the medieval period was leather armor. Leather armor was typically made from animal hides that were boiled and hardened to make them more durable. While leather armor was not as effective as chain mail or plate armor, it was much cheaper and easier to produce. It was also more comfortable to wear in hot weather than metal armor. In addition to armor, weapons were also an important part of medieval warfare. Swords were one of the most common weapons used during the medieval period. They were typically made from steel and had a sharp, pointed edge. Swords were versatile weapons that could be used for both cutting and thrusting, making them an ideal choice for close combat. Axes were another common weapon used during the medieval period. They were typically made from steel and had a sharp, wedge-shaped edge. Axes were often used to hack through armor and were particularly effective against plate armor. Spears were also commonly used during the medieval period. They were typically made from wood and had a metal tip. Spears were ideal for thrusting at enemies from a distance and could be used to keep enemies at bay. Bows and arrows were also an important part of medieval warfare. Bows were typically made from wood and had a string that was used to launch arrows. Arrows were typically made from wood and had a metal tip. Bows and arrows were particularly effective against enemies who were wearing armor, as they could penetrate even the toughest plate armor. In addition to these weapons, there were also more specialized weapons, such as maces, flails, and halberds. Maces were typically made from steel and had a heavy, blunt head. They were particularly effective against plate armor, as they could crush through the armor and cause significant damage. Flails were also commonly used during the medieval period. They consisted of a long handle with a chain attached to it. At the end of the chain was a heavy, spiked bolt that could be swung at an enemy to cause serious injury. Flails were particularly effective against opponents who were wearing chain mail or leather armor, as they could easily get tangled in the chain and become trapped. Halberds were long-handled weapons that had a spear-like tip on one end and an axe-like blade on the other. They were used by foot soldiers to attack opponents who were on horseback, as they could reach up and strike the horse while also attacking the rider. Now that we've discussed the different types of armor and weapons used during the medieval period, let's talk about their effectiveness in battle. The effectiveness of armor and weapons largely depended on the quality of the materials used to make them and the skill of the wearer. For example, a well-made suit of plate armor could provide excellent protection against most types of weapons. However, if the wearer was not skilled in combat, they could still be defeated by a more skilled opponent who knew how to target vulnerable areas such as joints or exposed areas of the armor. Similarly, a well-crafted sword or axe could be an effective weapon in battle, but it required a skilled warrior to wield it properly. If a warrior was not skilled in combat, they could be easily disarmed or defeated by an opponent who was more skilled. In addition to the quality of the materials and the skill of the wearer, the terrain and other factors could also affect the effectiveness of armor and weapons in battle. For example, heavily wooded areas could make it difficult for a warrior to use a sword effectively, while open fields could make it easier for an archer to target their opponent. In conclusion, medieval armor and weapons played a critical role in warfare during the medieval period. From chain mail to plate armor, and from swords to spears, these tools were essential for protecting warriors and defeating their enemies. While the effectiveness of these tools largely depended on the quality of the materials and the skill of the wearer, they played an important role in shaping the course of history during this fascinating period. Thank you for watching.